please welcome Jim Henry, Market Managing Partner at PwC.
Thank you, and thank you, Sophie, for those comments, which were really amazing at the type of work that you're doing. So we all know in the Bay Area and as businesses, it's our teams, it's our talent, it's our employees, and it's our people that really make us successful. At the Bay Area Council, we recognize that a strong, innovative, and competitive community is only possible when we engage all aspects of the workforce and we fill our talent thinking about diversity in all respects. That's why we've recognized gender equity as one of the top policy priorities for the Bay Area Council. And we're working to develop solutions, engage the business community, involve our civic and political leaders in advancing women in leadership in the Bay Area. The Bay Area Council Gender Equity Committee also advocates for policies to eliminate barriers to women's employment and close the gender wage gap and enhance workplace cultures around equality. Women are half the workforce and half of our population. We must work not only to create opportunities for women to succeed, but ensure that they are fairly recognized and rewarded for their hard work and for their impact. And I'm so proud to be able to introduce today our next speaker. She is a leader in promoting gender equality here in the Bay Area and across our nation. Jennifer Siebel Newsom is the founder and CEO of the Representation Project. This organization uses film as a catalyst to promote cultural transformation around the issues of gender stereotypes and inspires individuals and communities to challenge and overcome limitations so that everyone, regardless of gender, can fulfill their human potential. And if you haven't seen some of her films, including Misrepresentation and The Mask We Live In, I certainly encourage you to do so. They're very thought-provoking and provocative films. So Jennifer demonstrates how gender stereotypes impact all aspects of our lives, including our corporate cultures. She makes the case that gender equality in the workplace is not only good for individuals, but it's also good for our businesses and for the bottom line. I'm so happy, again, that she's here with us today, and look forward to her sharing some of her perspectives and comments on this topic. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Siebel Newsom.
Good afternoon. How is everyone today? Actually, not sure if it's morning. I have a new baby. Thank you to the Bay Area Council for having me here today. Now, I'm here today to draw back the curtain on something that perhaps you aren't conscious of every day, but that no doubt affects each and every one of you daily. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the social construct of gender and how your gender, unfortunately, matters, given America's narrow definitions of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man. So let me start with a little story that rings close to home. When my eldest daughter, Montana, was born, and my husband, Gavin Newsom, was the mayor of San Francisco, not surprisingly for a girl, Montana received many comments on her appearance and lots of pink. Seriously, it was as if she was swimming around inside a giant pink Pepto-Bismol bottle. A little over a year and a half later, when our son Hunter was born, Hunter received fewer comments on his appearance, and I think he's quite handsome, lots of blue, and interestingly, quite a few bibs, onesies, and silver cups displaying the White House insignia. He even received a letter from the President and First Lady, and separately a letter from the Vice President and Second Lady, welcoming him into the world, suggesting that the world was his oyster and that he was its pearl and that he could do and be and achieve anything. Well, we were extremely flattered to receive such gifts, even though secretly I wondered why the White House had not sent such letters to Montana. And then I had an epiphany, whereupon in opening yet another package for Hunter, I discovered a blue t-shirt, and yes, it was blue, with messaging in large caps, "Future President." Wow, I thought. Montana, our eldest, but also our girl, never received even the suggestion that she too could be president, that her opportunities in life were limitless. Perhaps you've heard this story before, but it continues. With the birth of my now 2-year-old daughter, Brooklyn. Upon Brooklyn's birth, my husband, now still Lieutenant Governor of California, tweeted her birth, just like the birth of her older sister and brother, all over the world. And to this day, Brooklyn has yet to receive a Madam President t-shirt, a letter from the White House, or any political paraphernalia from someone in formal leadership suggesting that she too, like her older brother Hunter, could be president, that her opportunities in life were limitless. Now, here's the ironic finale of this ridiculous gender story. And it's the last baby story, I promise. With my newest little addition, Dutch Newsom, when Dutch was born, he's currently 11 weeks old, Dutch received multiple letters from a former president, as well as an engraved silver cup and tray from a sitting senator. Interesting, isn't it? Our boys receive the adulation and encouragement to be leaders. Our girls receive the praise and acknowledgement of their aesthetics. But not cool. I mean, it's not that we're not grateful, but you must all recognize the pattern that I'm talking about. We live in a society where women, despite being 51% of the population and giving birth to 100% of the population, are still treated as second-class citizens, objects in many cases with little to no agency, and where men are still regarded as primary authority figures central to social organization, political power, moral authority, and control. Control of pretty much everything. Our biological differences aside, gender stereotypes and the resulting inequity really do start with the concepts of t-shirts and dressing up. Can I ask, how many of you, and I want to see you raise your hands, how many of you in the audience have spent time with young toddler girls recently? Young toddler-age girls, how many? All right, quite a few of you. Well, if I have to go to another princess-themed birthday party, I may go frozen on all of these little toddlers and let it go. I can't tell you how many of these parties I've attended for my daughter's friends over the past several years, and Montana is just 6. I'm continually struck by how every toddler, except mine, is dressed in pink from head to toe, in either princess attire or matching pink tutus. The girls receive tiaras and wands upon entering the parties, nail polish and jewelry-making stations abound, and the conversation always revolves around how pretty the little princesses look. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not morally opposed to the color pink or the occasional rhinestone. I wear one daily. It's just the sheer dominance of this ideal is troubling. The world celebration of princess and celebrity culture only reinforces a cultural trend whereby our young girls who hear so many of those comments about their looks and so few about their capacity to lead are handicapped with the notion that their value lies in their youth, their beauty, and their sexuality. Not to mention securing Prince Charming, while their brothers and male peers are taught early on that they are our natural-born leaders. Gender stereotypes have become so normalized in all of us that we're not even conscious of them, and the marketplace and media further reinforces a culture that devalues women and girls while encouraging dominance and aggression in our boys and men. This is wrong. Why? It's just media and merchandising, many creators, consumers, and naysayers argue. And yet media is the most powerful cultural messenger of all. Did you know that women are a mere 5% of media positions of clout? That means that 95% of what we all watch, read, and hear comes from a limited perspective, a masculine perspective. In fact, in 2014, just 2 directors across the top 100 films were female. Further, there were only 28 female directors who worked across the top 700 films from 2007 to 2014. And then it shouldn't surprise us that only 11% of the top grossing films between 2007 and this 2014 were gender balanced, meaning they featured girls or women in roughly half of all speaking parts. And a full 74% of all women on screen this past year were white, while only 11% were African American, 4% Latina, 4% Asian, and 4% otherworldly. In other words, audiences were as likely to see a non-human woman as they were to see a Latina or Asian woman in film. Ironic, since Latinas make up 17% of the US population, while aliens make up 0. And that's not to mention that once a female character does make it on screen, she often perpetuates limiting stereotypes about women. She may function as merely an accessory to the male lead story arc, or maybe she is the lead with her own narrative, but she wears surprisingly few items of clothing to get her job done. Or maybe her main goal in life is to find a husband. Anyone ever watch rom-com? But perhaps even more problematic is that young people across the US and the globe buy into these dangerous messages that suggest that women and people of color are of less value. US teens in particular consume on average over 10 hours of media a day. So between cell phones, iPads, and tablets, violent video games, and marketers selling to us at the bus stop, on the freeway, and in magazine stands, American youth are being sold sex, violence, and gender stereotypes 24/7. And young women in particular are paying a high price. I knew I had to rewrite this story and to do something about this limiting box that we were putting women and girls into. So I made the documentary Misrepresentation to challenge the media's limited portrayal of what it means to be a powerful woman, and to address how mainstream media contribute to the underrepresentation of women in positions of power and influence. Since its premiere at the Sundance Film Festival and selling to Oprah Winfrey Network in 2011, Misrepresentation has had a global impact, with public screenings in over 70 countries and digital downloads in 229 territories. But before I go any further, I want to clarify something. I'm not here to blame boys and men. In fact, I want to make the opposite argument, that boys and men need a new status quo just as much as girls and women do. Because boys and men are born into a society that ranks their half of the population over the female half, such that anything associated with femininity is deemed inferior. They're encouraged to compete, form hierarchies, and utilize aggression, regardless of the cost. Over time, they assimilate the various messages fed to them, both consciously and subconsciously, that to be a man is to disconnect their heads from their hearts, repress emotions, and deny all associations with the feminine. They're told not to act like girls, as if being female in and of itself is something to be ashamed of. Empathy, emotion, and compassion are considered signs of weakness. And to be a man is to be independent, aggressive, stoic, and in control. And there are real social consequences of this socialization. In fact, in the US, compared to girls, the stats are horrific. In fact, girls compared to boys, so compared to girls, boys are more likely to be prescribed meds in the US, more likely to be diagnosed with a behavior disorder. Boys are more likely to binge drink, be expelled or flunk out of school. Compared to girls, boys are more likely to commit a violent crime, and compared to girls, boys are more likely to take their own lives. The statistics motivated me as the mother of sons, but also to complement misrepresentation, to turn the lens and make The Mask You Live In, which addresses the boy crisis in America and how our society is actually failing us all, not just our women and girls. Now, I share this with you not to depress you, but to call upon you. There's something wrong with this culture, and it's up to all of us to challenge and change the status quo. That said, and I don't have any media to show you here today, but you may be asking yourself in this very moment, how and why does all of this relate to all of you here at the Bay Area Council Outlook Conference, a prestigious gathering of some of the brightest corporate minds and corporations? Well, what's becoming more and more clear is that our gendered socialization processes touch and influence all parts of our society, starting in early childhood, as mentioned, but affecting us long after we're grown up in our corporate workplaces and corporate culture. The most visible outcome of our gendered social norms is the resulting lack of diversity in leadership. What's ironic about all of this is that we all should know by now, and younger generations do seem to know this, that the greater the diversity of leadership, the greater the creativity and productivity, and the better the bottom line. Countless studies prove that companies with women leaders or diverse teams perform better. In fact, a study completed just this March by the Peterson Institute for International Economics of nearly 22,000 publicly traded companies in 91 countries found that an increase in the share of women in top management positions from 0 to 30% would be associated with a 15% rise in profitability. Moreover, women-led businesses have a 35% higher return on investment and a 34% higher return to shareholders than male-owned businesses. The World Bank even estimates that if we reduce the wage gap between men and women, even slightly, and increase the numbers of women in leadership in business and government, we could increase US GDP by as much as 9%. Imagine the global impact. So what are we waiting for? I want to share with you two studies that reveal the institutionalized sexism and unconscious bias that perpetuates and reinforces this inequitable status quo. The first is a Yale University study that concluded that science professors widely regard female undergraduates as less competent than male undergraduates who have the same accomplishments and skills. In essence, the professors were less likely to offer the women mentoring or a job, and on the occasion that they did offer a job, they offered it at a much lower salary. Now, this study is especially interesting because one would assume scientists are more objective given their training. But with the opposite true, it exposes the biases that prevent women from shattering the glass ceiling. Another interesting study conducted by a professor associated with Harvard University found that current male managers in US corporations who are in traditional marriages where their wives stay home, these men carry with them an unconscious bias against promoting their female colleagues into leadership. And these men, approximately 11 million in the United States, populate the upper echelons of organizations and are the biggest earners, further prohibiting women from achieving leadership status. As these studies prove, our internalized gender norms are actively prohibiting the gender equality movement from gaining real speed. In fact, gendered stereotypes saddle women at every turn, from more responsibility at home, to pressure against speaking out in meetings, to not earning their due pay. And what is the result of all this? Women leave and men get ahead. And the men that do get ahead, by the way, are saddled in their own right by a corporate leadership model that favors traditionally masculine traits, such as dominance, aggression, overconfidence, and a win-at-all-costs mentality. This leadership style can be doubly alienating for both women and men who do not fit into this hyper-masculine norm and feel they cannot bring their true, authentic selves to work. Now, some of you might be arguing, well, hang on a second. We've made changes. We've made progress. I'm not one of those men. I'm actually the more authentic male leader. And yet, women's leadership across businesses and various industries continues to plateau at around 18–19% representation in American politics, business, military, religion, media, culture, and entertainment, something that is easily forgotten when one woman makes it to the top. Think about that for a second. Did Marissa Mayer's appointment to CEO of Yahoo end sexism in Silicon Valley? Or let's frame it another way. Does Barack Obama's presidency prove we are a post-racial society? Of course not. Some of our current leaders may care for these women and minorities, but as the studies indicate and as our culture reflects, gender equality issues are not necessarily a top priority. And as we've seen, the biases are so often deeply institutionalized that current leaders, both male and female, by the way, we women can be part of the problem, aren't even conscious of the inequities. A major cause of this inequity happens to be the normalization and acceptance of the status quo as if it's the way things have to be, i.e., men are from Mars, women are from Venus, men are the breadwinners, women are the caretakers. It's the 21st century. Women are 47% of the workforce. So how do we remedy this culture of limiting stereotypes that's holding all of us back? This is where the work at the Representation Project, the organization that I founded, comes into play. For starters, it requires all of us to challenge toxic norms in public culture, corporate culture, and daily life. And as some of the most diverse, innovative, and powerful companies in the world, I ask, do we not all have a moral imperative, but also the incredible opportunity to correct the inequities of the past and right these cultural injustices? I mean, can you all re-examine with a critical eye the products, programs, and culture you create, which, whether we want to admit it or not, contribute to what is normal around us? Do your advertisements play into outdated stereotypes, or do your advertisements continually rise above them? Do you, as leaders, feel comfortable challenging advertisers and global marketers who may work for you when they rely on outdated and harmful tropes? And what about your company's commitment to diversity and inclusion? And does it even have a commitment? Has it taken a pledge? A new global study of women in their 30s actually found that the #1 reason women leave jobs is because employers won't pay them and promote them. Surprisingly, reads the report, young women identified finding a higher paying job, a lack of learning and development, and a shortage of interesting and meaningful work as the primary reasons why they leave. So if we think about that, how much power do we have in this room to change that? To pay and promote women equally, to give adequate family leave for both women and men, to support flex time. Certainly our history, institutions, and traditions have, to varying degrees, enabled patriarchy. But the realities of our past do not have to limit the possibilities of our future. We are starting to see sprinkles of women and men publicly supporting each other and speaking out against these corporate injustices, but we're going to have to see so many more of them. Otherwise, we're all to blame, because it's easier now than ever to connect with and influence others through information sharing, education, and advocacy. There's so much at our fingertips these days, there's no stopping us now. I made the documentaries Misrepresentation and The Mask You Live In and launched the Representation Project to be a catalyst for consciousness raising and cultural change. And we are changing attitudes, behavior, and culture, one individual, one community, one company, and one industry at a time. It's been over 5 years since Misrepresentation premiered at Sundance, and I'm still approached daily by individuals who say how Misrepresentation helped them recognize their power as citizens and consumers to affect change. From the male public school teacher who helped his students start a national social media campaign to call out sexist advertisers like Carl's Jr., Teleflora, and American Apparel, to the mother who successfully rallied then New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg to pull a pornographic ad down from the bus stop near her 4-year-old daughter's school, to the advertising executives who've taken responsibility for their own admonitions, screened misrepresentation internally, and pledged to be a part of the solution, to the young female engineers who were inspired by Misrepresentation to start Goldie Blocks and Miss Possible, inspiring future generations of girls through toys and apps, to the father who marched Misrepresentation into his New York finance firm's HR office when he noted that all of the people being let go of were working moms, to the multiple Super Bowl advertisers like GoDaddy who completely altered their ridiculously sexist commercials as a result of our Not Buying It campaign, fully transforming the Super Bowl advertising landscape, to the ABC and Entertainment Tonight reporters who switched their interview focus at the Oscars in response to our Ask Her More campaign, altering the cultural conversation on the red carpet, to our community of followers who pressured Bud Light to remove a despicable slogan that promoted rape culture from their bottles within 2 hours of it being released, to the many young men who've been inspired to follow their true passion and finally join the choir or the drama department after seeing The Mask You Live In. All around the globe, people are taking action and transforming culture, one individual and one community at a time. And it's beyond inspiring. And so now it's up to all of you in this room here. How are you all going to use your power and your privilege to be a part of the larger cultural solution? I'm here to remind you all that you're all in the driver's seat. So let's demand a culture and a society that uplifts us all, that inspires my daughters and all of you women in the room to be presidents and in the C-suite, and that encourages my sons and all of you men in the room to be empathic, nurturing partners both at home and in your places of work. Imagine what that world would look like if we had more courageous men and women actively working to leave the world in a more balanced place. Your engagement in creating a healthier culture is the solution to so many of this country's current problems, not to mention unforeseen future problems. And the rest of the world is watching and waiting to see that we get it right. Not to mention that the Bay Area in particular gets it right. I like to say as California goes, or the Bay Area goes, so goes the rest of the country. So join us and use the films and tools at the Representation Project to inspire actions in your homes, schools, churches, communities, corporations, and places of work. Go to therepresentationproject.org and take the pledge to get involved. You all are capable of affecting so much good in the world, and I'm just here to remind you that working together, we will succeed. Thank you.
It's really inspiring, a little bit overwhelming when you think about the amount of work yet to be done. So when you think about this room of leaders in our organizations and the change that's needed to really build a sustainable culture around equality, is there one takeaway that you'd ask that everybody leave this meeting and thinking about your comments and be able to go act on?
You all have to make it a priority. Gender equality, fair, equal representation needs to be a priority. Representation matters. And it can't just be an initiative that you defer to the women's group or the diversity group to champion and kind of build a grassroots movement and make everyone feel good about. It has to come from the top down.
Great, thank you. Now, last time I saw you, you were opening the comments before the screening of The Mask You Live In at the Better Man Conference. And so at that conference, it was all about engaging men in gender equality. Do you feel optimistic that there is a major change going on in terms of men being equal partners in this area, or is it something that we're just in the early stages on? So any advice for men?
Yeah, no, I think we're in the early stages, but there's so many incredible men, and I feel like I know them all, who are making a real effort and commitment to equality, regardless of one's gender, race, class, circumstances in life, sexual orientation. So, it's up to us to elevate those men's voices, and it's up to the rest of you to be brave and courageous and join in the conversation. And if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your daughters, do it for your granddaughters, do it for your sons, because your sons are suffering. I'll say in interviewing young men for The Mask You Live In, I was so moved by these young boys who were so vulnerable and pure and innocent, especially, the early middle school years, feeling like there was so much pressure to be someone that they weren't. And, many boys resist conforming to those stereotypes. And ultimately, I think they're happier in the end, although it's quite painful in those middle school and high school years. But if you look at the boys that conform, they ultimately come back around and suffer. And you see it through escapist behaviors, whether it's escapism into pornography or violent video games or a sports culture or a performance in terms of, behavioral performance in terms of what they end up doing later in life, career-wise. So, there's just way too much suffering. It's created by us. We have to take responsibility for that. And I am optimistic. But it requires all of you in positions of power and privilege to speak up and out and make it a #1 priority that you empower the women around you and not just placate them temporarily to make them go away, but that you actually invest in them and create the culture that enable them to succeed. Similarly, you must provide and support to boys and men to really stay true to themselves and not conform to these sort of outdated stereotypes of what it is to be a man.
So there's certainly been a lot of conversation in the Bay Area about women in business.
Yes.
And when you think about a woman going into the workforce, what kind of advice do you give them today?
Women going into the workforce, you know, you have to be confident. You have to find allies. You have to look for both male and female, you know, mentors and supporters and promoters. But you also have to be yourself and not try and become a man to succeed, unless that's kind of who you feel like you are. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you have to also build a community of men and women around you who value equality. Yeah. And align yourself with them, and really also put your hand out for those behind you.
So you've got 4 young children
Yes.
at home?
Yes.
2 boys and 2 girls?
Yes.
Okay. So, so what are you and Gavin doing? First of all, yeah, you look surprisingly awake, but what are you and Gavin doing to make sure that you're actually building your thoughts around gender stereotypes and how you raise your children?
So, you know, I was an athlete growing up, and I'm one of 5 girls, and we all played sports, and I think team sports for girls are really important and healthy, and I'm grateful that my parents gave me that opportunity. And so, but at the same time, you know, I danced, and you know, so basically my parents raised me as a human being. I mean, I was out in the woods always exploring and investigating and sort of being, you know, one with nature and what have you. And I was just, you know, I was a kid that kind of was exposed to everything and got to be who I ultimately am. So raising our girls, I mean, I think it peers who they socialize with, who their friends are. It's important that we raise kids in a community that also has the same values. Right. And I've noted the difference between raising my eldest daughter, Montana, and the community that I initially kind of, that she was raised in just by virtue of where she went to school versus the one that she's in now. There was a lot of sort of the princess culture initially. And I always fought that. And I think the more people heard me talk and the more they were exposed to the work we're doing, ultimately I found a community that embraces a more sort of holistic approach to raising kids. So my second daughter, Brooklyn, I think she's so interesting because she plays trucks with her brother and dolls with her sister, and it's really cool. I'm curious to see who she becomes. Our son, Hunter, the first boy, you know, he's been so interesting for me. When his younger sister was born, I gave him a doll because it's important that boys learn to care for other beings just as women are taught to care for other beings. And yes, he bit the doll's hand off, but the doll was really scary and ugly looking. I mean, literally, he looked like he was like, you know, he was very scary looking. I don't know if I would have kept him in my bed either. Hunter loves to cook. We encourage that. We encourage all the creativity. You know, I had him in ballet school once. It bummed me out that it was so princessy and pink. I encourage, if you have sons, I encourage them all to dance. I think that's such a great skill set and helps you throughout life and in sports and what have you. I did not stick with it because it was a juggle. But the caregiving, the cooking, the creativity, so, you know, I'll do the same with Dutch. And just reinforcing what it is to be a human being. I think at the end of the day, we need to raise human beings, not gender stereotypes. And I think that'll really help all of us down the line as we recreate this culture that we've all, unfortunately, been indoctrinated into.
And no matter how much you do at home, you're still dealing and fighting with at times the broader societal impact on them as well.
We are, but that's why we're doing our work at the Representation Project. So we've taken on big industries, and I say we, the royal we, I'm talking about all of our constituents, I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about the general public. You know, weekly we reach 2.5 to 5 million people through conversations and actions, weekly actions. And so, you know, it really takes all of us coming together to kind of reach and hit that tipping point of change. And I'm confident that we can, because there's enough sort of awakened minds in the Bay Area in particular, but around the world, that are saying enough, there's too much imbalance, our boys are being indoctrinated with violence, no wonder you have the statistics of violence and rape and mass shootings and what have you nationally. On the other hand, our girls are being indoctrinated with this sort of thinking that their sex is power, this sort of hypersexual culture, and that's not getting us anywhere either. So look, we have a lot of work to do, but together we really can affect change. It's just, we all have to wake up, and we have to take little steps. I mean, what we do weekly at the Representation Project is we give you something you can do in a matter of minutes. And so it becomes sort of a really easy win. It's gratifying, and you're ultimately contributing to something that's bigger than you. It's bigger than you, and I think that it's meaningful, right? And I think that this recent study of girls in their 30s, of women in their 30s, uncovered that we're all kind of looking for meaning in life. And so I'm just encouraging all of us here to not just perpetuate, be a cog in the wheel and perpetuate what we know, but be a part of something that's bigger than all of us, which is really being a part of this large social change that's going on right now in our country.
So I see we're just about out of time before the break, but one last question for you. What's next for the Representation Project?
The Representation Project is tackling inequality and how the American dream isn't the reality it's purported to be. And we're delving more into intersectionality issues of gender, race, and class. And we're working with corporations in the private sector to really kind of look at the little steps that can be taken to ensure a healthier culture for all.
Great, thank you. Well, for the Bay Area Council, we are really pleased to be able to show misrepresentation, I think on July 29th.
Great.
And so please look on the website for the details for that event. Looking forward to that. Not sure if you're able to join us, but you're certainly welcome.
Thank you.
And that would be great. So thank you for the comments. Hopefully we can continue this conversation out on the break as well. Appreciate all you're doing in the area, and please join me in giving Jennifer a hand. Thank you.